Well, it's that time of year, an important time of year. Welcome to the panel presented by Sportsnet. And as the Oilers look ahead to trade deadline to build their best possible roster, I have to bring in my best possible roster. That's why I'm joined by Bob Stauffer and Jack Michaels. And guys, we'll talk about trade deadline in just a minute, but let's start with tonight. What a cohesive effort by this group. We saw contributions from all over.
Well, first off, let's hope the trade deadline has a little bit more of a wider selection than the slim pickings that you were entrusted with securing for this panel.
Said it.
But first things first, I think you have to look. Edmonton scored 6 goals against the Pittsburgh Penguins, but for me, it starts with the goals against. And coming out of the break, it was a 4-5-1 record, and in all 10 games, the Oilers surrendered at least 3 goals. Since that point, Stuart Skinner, 3 quality starts. Calvin Pickard, very sharp against Pittsburgh, particularly early when that game could have gone kind of either direction. And instead, Pickard holds the fort, and the Oilers end up blowing the Penguins out. The other thing that certainly came to fruition in the Pittsburgh game is kind of up and down the lineup contributions. I mean, Evander Kane finished -1 in this game, and I thought it was one of his strongest nights in the last couple of weeks. He's due for a breakthrough. Tangibly on the score sheet, you saw Cody Ceci, you saw Brett Kulak chip in with a couple of assists. That was an adjustment made by Chris Knobloch, shaking up the pairing. Ryan McLeod gets a goal and an assist. He needed that desperately. Warren Fogle, a new career high points. He was on the score sheet. So, yes, the usual suspects were present and accounted for. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl were very strong, and Zach Hyman has now doubled his previous career high coming to Edmonton. I mean, 42 goals, I didn't have it. But for me, it's the depth and the goaltending and the team defense that is going to stake Edmonton into a position where they can climb in the standings.
Well, I like what Paul Coffey and Chris did with changing the 2 pairings. I mean, obviously you're not going to change Ekholm and Bouchard. Matthias Ekholm leads the NHL at plus 53 since he was acquired in the trade from Nashville, and he's a real good pairing with Evan. But I thought Darnell and Cody had some tough moments against Seattle, and I think it gives the coaching staff a little bit different option, a different look here, and I think it worked tonight, there's no question. I mean, that's a huge pairing between Nurse and Desharnais, and then obviously Kulak and Ceci. I've played together before, and they were solid too. So I like that.
That's 13-foot of defenseman is what you're talking about.
That's a big, rangy D. And the other thing that sort of has become a reoccurring theme, and Jack has made me like Pittsburgh. Like, Pittsburgh is probably my 3rd or 4th favorite city to go to.
This is not a good matchup for the Penguins right now.
The last 5 matchups, the Oilers have outscored them now 29-9. And this is one of the rare times, I think, we know Connor and Leon get everybody's best game. But you know what? The Penguins get Edmonton's best game, and the Oilers laid off the gas for the 2nd consecutive game against Pittsburgh. The Oilers, they could have run it up worse, and they didn't.
Well, it was interesting because both teams were on the second of a back-to-back, but here's where some of the off-ice things that Bob and I don't necessarily share on all these panels, but Edmonton, an efficient trip home. They were in position to watch that game from minute 1. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh had a delay, didn't get into their hotel rooms until 3 o'clock. So while both teams technically were on the second of a back-to-back, the Oilers had a 7-hour difference. And Bob has said this before, and he's right. Edmonton is the one team right now in the National Hockey League that exploits Pittsburgh's weaknesses. If you think the Penguins might be old, slow, and a bit tired, only the Oilers kind of reveal that, and they do it consistently, and I think Bob's bang on. Connor McDavid, very respectful of Sidney Crosby. Think of the aspects of his game that have improved over the last 3 or 4 years. They're all Sidney Crosby's strengths, and he gets up to play, and it has not been a good matchup for Pittsburgh at all.
So, guys, we know that this is a cohesive group, what the Oilers look like right now. We're just a few days away from trade deadline. What is it going to take, Bob, to be able to bring them to the next level and maybe even give them a complete picture?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what these 2 lineups, the Oilers and Pittsburgh, look when the 2 teams play again next Sunday afternoon. Because and Kyle Dubas was here, if I'm Kyle at this stage, I think the writing's on the wall. And I mean, he's already traded as number 1 this year. Now it's protected, top 10 protected, but I think you're going to see the Penguins unloading some players. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for Ken Holland to execute a trade as good as the Matthias Ekholm trade, because that has been the best trade the Oilers have made as an organization in years. Just like Zach Hyman's been the best free agent signing in all time for the Oilers. But I see Edmonton adding a top 9 forward, probably a second line guy that can play right wing, if not a 3C, a third line center. And then I still think they're going to add another center, maybe another right shot. And then on defense, I know some people think they need to upgrade in their top 4. I was intrigued by what we saw tonight, and I'm also pragmatic. I don't want to see the Oilers give up a number 1 unless they're getting a player with term back in the deal. So I wonder whether or not it's just going to be a depth D. But I don't have all the answers. I'm sort of looking from 30,000 feet and saying there is a way that they can make those additions. Maybe a top 6 right wing with an expiring contract, a fourth line right shot center, and a depth defenseman without moving anybody else out of the forward unit. And that would give them a lot deeper forward, and then a depth defenseman that could come in as a 7.
That will be a challenge. I think if they're to acquire all 3 of those pieces up front, I do expect potentially a body to maybe be subtracted by the unit just because of the cap issue. They're going to potentially have to bring in a third team to retain,
Right, yes.
To retain something. I'll go one step further than what Bob said. I absolutely don't think there will be any sort of addition in goal. And the other thing that I think is I absolutely think that Edmonton's top 6 as presently constructed will be their top 6 going into the playoffs. I think they will add specifically what they see as a 7th defenseman. You cannot go into the playoffs with just the 6 and Broberg. They will add one ingredient in my estimation, but I do not think they're targeting someone that they see as potentially cracking that top 6.
Yeah, we'll see on that. I think they're going to find a way to get in the game. They'll have to move a guy potentially down the minors. Should mention with Broberg, he is back tomorrow against San Diego. He returns to the lineup after missing the last 10 games.
How about that skating he was doing the other day online? Wouldn't you love to have those wheels?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, guys, just a few days away, bound to be an exciting week, and it all kicks off. The Oilers will be in Boston on Tuesday.